Hello, it is February 24th, and today we're talking about classroom rules. And we're knee-deep in the chapter 3, and we're talking about classroom management in chapter 3. And the last video that I had, we talked about how you are going to teach in your classroom really should be how you set your classroom up. So your feel of your classroom should be indicative of how you teach in your classroom. And of course you don't know that yet because we're just at the beginning. But you know, if we have all the cool stuff, all the bells and whistles that we could possibly think of in a classroom, how would that affect our teaching, or how would our teaching change? So the next thing I want to talk to you about is classroom rules. How do we feel about those? At the beginning of my teaching career, I had rules for everything because I thought if you have a well-managed classroom, things are going to go perfectly. But having a plan does not always mean that it's followed. And what I found is that the more rules I had, the more consequences I had to have. So if you're going to be, talking when I'm talking, what's going to happen? Do I just tell you to be quiet? I mean, do I do it once? Do I do it 17 times? Like, where does that go? And then I've had teachers that I've worked with that have had like lists of rules from top to bottom on their door of things that you will not do in this classroom. So how inviting is that to a child come into a classroom saying you will not speak without being told, you will do your own work, you will keep your eyes on your own paper, you won't be, all this stuff, all the rules. So right off the bat, that student is feeling what? Oh, right, I don't want to be here. It's an uncomfortable situation. So what I have found over the years of teaching is that really classroom management comes down to relationship building. If you can build a relationship with that student, they are more likely to do what you're asking them to do from the beginning. And then how you want to set your rules up in your classroom really is your choice, but just know that whatever rule you have, you need to have a consequence for. So like I said before, like in my first couple of years, I had lots of rules and I have lots of consequences, and that means that I had to keep track of all of them. And then if somebody wasn't going out for recess, that means I didn't get my break. And that was really hard because if you have to go to the bathroom or if you have to make copies, that's the only time you have to do it. And honestly, taking away your recess is the worst thing you can do for a child. So we really have to think about what your management is going to reflect, how you want your classroom culture, the vibe, the feeling that the kids get when they come into my classroom. So I changed definitely over the years when I got a little better at my craft. But what I've learned is that the better relationships I have with my students, the less managing I have to do of behaviors. So sometimes it got to be towards the end, I knew my students pretty well because I had been working on this for quite some time, like this craft of getting relationships built with students, that sometimes I would just look at them and I'm like, dude, and it would stop. That's all I had to do, which, it takes a while to get to that point. But if you remember from the first couple of videos, if you remember anything out of this class at all, you have to remember the two big ideas of education is number one, build relationships with your students, and number two, you are responsible for their learning. Those are the two biggies. And I think that classroom management comes down to that relationship part. Okay, I'm going to show you, I'm going to get myself tinier here and show you this website. This website is called Pedagogy Game, and it's 36 rules for student success. And I'm going to see what you think of these. Okay. Classroom rules, there's 36 of them here, and you can take these or leave these or however you want. But number one rule, ask questions. So what do you think of that rule? I love that rule. I love that rule. If my kids are expected to question me and they're expected to challenge that they're learning and ask questions and dig deeper, yes, that's absolutely true. Very, very good. But then if my rule is everybody has to ask questions and everybody has to be, into their learning, I probably don't need to be like staying in your seat, this one right here. Because sometimes when you are learning things, you need to go talk to your friends, we need to talk to the teacher, we need to go to the library, we need to find out this information. So to me, the rule of ask questions, absolutely, yes. But does that mean that I have to still sit in my nice little neat desks, face forward, head down, be quiet? No, not at all. So I think ask questions is a great grade classroom rule. I don't know if I'd even make it a rule. I would just say that this is my expectations. I'm expecting you to ask a lot of questions, and I hope you do. Number 2, respect and listen to your classmates. Yes, I don't know if that is something that we need to have rules and consequences with, because I think if you have a relationship built into your classroom, it's going to be an automatic thing. I'm going to model respect. I'm going to respect you. I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to show that respect to other students, and so then everybody has that mutual agreement that yes, we're going to listen to our classmates and we're going to listen to the teacher out of respect. That one is a little bit vague because, you know, what constitutes being respectful and not. It could be a million different things. So that would be something that you'd have to have a conversation with your classroom. Okay, the one raise your hand to speak. I hate this rule. I hate this rule because it's not in our society. So if you and I were chatting right now about, you know, something you watch on Netflix or the, you know, what you saw in Billings last week, whatever it is, we are going to have a conversation. Like, I talk, you talk, I talk, you talk, back and forth. I'm not raising my hand like, hey, let me in here. Because when we speak about learning things and digging into information and questioning things and, you know, having that dialogue, raising your hand puts that other person as lower than. And I don't want that to happen. So in my 3rd grade classroom, I had a rule is that you did not have to raise your hand to talk. You just spoke up and talk. But, you know, you can't be running around the room talking to every, you know, Tom, Dick, and Harry about something else other than what we're talking about, because that wouldn't be respectful. So what we're doing is that we're trying to get a culture of learners to be interested in what we're talking about, engage with what they're talking about, talk to each other about this information, and you don't have to raise your hand every time you want to talk. Now, sometimes, yes, if I'm up there giving a lecture and then you want to jump in, sometimes just even like a wave or something, I had my students do, but truly just raising their hand, I did not, because that personally to me did not fit into my flow of my classroom, and it didn't work. I had a huge unit on worms, on vermiculture when I was in 3rd grade, and I don't know if you know what vermiculture is, but it's the idea that worms break down garbage into topsoil, and, you know, it's this great idea. So we actually brought in worms, like I ordered 500 red regular worms and set up a vermiculture place in my classroom. It was a little gross, I understand. It wasn't for everybody, I get it. But my students had hands-on talking about, learning about, reading about worms when it came to like reproduction and how they ate and how they put nitrogen back into the soil. So when I had that going, and that went on for like 6 weeks, and it was amazing. We did so much cool stuff with it, but it was never a time where we had to sit down and raise our hands about the worms. We would like take our lunch and like our leftover lunch and put it into the worms, and we'd watch them eat it, and we'd talk about like what foods they liked, what foods they didn't like, and surprisingly they ate nothing. They ate nothing that had a lot of excess sugar or salt in it. They only ate the natural things. So if you threw a piece of lettuce in there, they'd be all over that. If you threw a piece of like, we put canned peas in there, they wouldn't touch them. They're too salty. So maybe if the food's not good enough for worms, it's not good enough for us. Anyway, but I was just thinking about like classroom rules. If I would have had them sit down in their desk, face forward, facing me, head down, be quiet, how much learning would they have gotten out of that experience? Not many. So, something to think about. Okay, so be quiet when the teacher is talking, be quiet when the classmates are talking. I think that goes back to respect. If you have that mutual respect in your classroom, then you can model those conversations. So, share new ideas. Yes, very great rule. I don't know if I'd have it as a rule. I would have it as an expectation. Like, hey, in this classroom, we share ideas and we share questions. We ask questions, we find out information, and we let other people know. And you're going to have to do that by talking to each other. Keep your hands to yourself, of course. That's a big one. That's more for the kindergarten preschool guys, but I don't know if I'd have that as a rule, but it would be something that we would say often. Okay, I'm going to kind of jump down here to the next ones. Be a good friend, be on time. And so I think with be a good friend, we can always model some of those characteristics of how we're going to be good friends and good classmates to each other. I don't know if this would be a rule, your choice. Let's see. This one right down here. Be proud of your work. Okay, I don't know if this would be a rule, but I do want this as an expectation. Because in my classroom, and when I say mine, I'm just giving you what I have as far as like experience. You will have different experiences, and I bet you have been in different classrooms that probably had some of these things going, but this is just my experience, and I'm just sharing my experience. So being proud of their work. Every time a student did something, I wanted it to be their best effort. And I always told them, I said, is this your best effort when they're handing it to me? And if they said no, I said, okay, that's all right. Here's, again, I'm going to give you another chance to get that done. And so then when they do give me their best effort, they can be proud of like, hey, I might not have gotten it right, but it was the best I could do at this time. I've gotten extra time to do it. I've gotten extra help to do it. If this is my best work, then this is what it is. I'm proud of what I turned in. And I use those conversations all the time with students about just because something is 100% doesn't mean that you learn something from it. Most often we learn from our failures. So if we got something wrong, we go back and change it. Anytime I had students change something, I had to have them explain it to me, like why they changed it, what were they thinking, instead of just like putting down any old answer. So that seemed to help. So being proud of their work really does give a culture of that they put some time and effort into this, I'm going to put some time and effort into this. One of the things I did in third grade, again, is I had quiet reading time. So everybody had to have a book, and they had to find some place in the room to read, and they read for 20 minutes. And then during that time, they could read whatever they wanted, whatever book, whatever, anything. And then at the end of that 20 minutes, they would all get their reading response journals out, and they would tell me what they read about, and they would write it in letter form, like, Dear Mrs. Anderson, today I read blah, 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 blah. And so I, every single day, would write back to them. I would say, Dear Joey, oh, I love that book. Have you gotten to the part where blah, blah, blah happens? And what do you think about this character? And so when I had that conversation with those students, writing and reading and reading and writing, they were proud of their work because I was giving them individual responses for what they're doing and praising them for different efforts and making them think about different things. So it really did make a huge, huge difference. So classroom rules, what that kind of comes down to is like, what are you going to focus on? Mine at the beginning of my teaching was different, focused on what at the end of my teaching career, I was focused more on relationships. If you are kind of following along on chapter 3, on page 83, there are rules that you can kind of look at that are classroom conduct rules versus academic rules. And I would really suggest when you write your rules, write them in a positive light. So like the be respectful rule. So if we say be respectful, that's a rule, that's an expectation. We don't say don't be disrespectful. No, don't be disrespectful. And so when we put that on there, we're telling them the no before putting the don't on there. So if it was like putting things in a different light of saying that things are positive, that these are the things you can do, instead of taking away like these are the things you can't do. And so if we write them more in a positive light, we're going to be better off. So oftentimes when I did classroom rules at the beginning of the year, first day of school, all that good stuff that's going to happen, a lot of it is like, hey, we're in here to learn together. I am going to show you some kind of cool stuff. I bet you're going to show me some cool stuff, and let's just become better together. And that really did help. And I don't know if you follow The Learning Lab by Trevor. I don't remember his last name, but he talks about Tiger and fixed mindset and like growth mindset. I'll put the link down below. But there's a thing called the Pygmalion Effect that he talks about, and it's absolutely fabulous. Is that if we really believe our students will do better, we will treat them better and act better, and they will actually do better. Will they be perfect? No, but they'll be better than what they were before. And so it's a wonderful idea of like us putting labels on students really does affect how they learn because it affects how we treat them, even if it is subconsciously. So I want you to think about that in your classroom rules too, is like, do you believe your students can learn? And if they can, let's put them in situations where they can learn and make sure we have positive rules about it. The things that you are probably going to run into most with your trouble with your rules is if you are not consistent. If you are consistent and you say things one way, it should be that way every single time. So consistency is absolutely key. So please read over chapter 3 about classroom management. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, let me know. I will drop that video in below this about the Pygmalion effect. It's really, really interesting. Okay, thanks.